All right, welcome to the show, y'all. Hope everybody out there is having a great day. It is Tuesday, February 10th, and I have a jam-packed show for you. So, in just a second, the economy is absolutely shitting the splunky. It is just, you'll see. I'll give you some specifics in a second, but there are really rough times ahead. Really rough times. So, we'll get into that. We'll also talk about how Tim Dillon is perhaps now turning on Trump more aggressively than he was previously. He sees the writing on the wall. He sees the way the wind's blowing, and now he's trying to get ahead of it. So, if you're keeping track of this stuff, both Andrew Schultz and Tim Dillon are now way ahead of Joe Rogan, who's still running cover for the Epstein class. So we'll talk about that as well. We have some embarrassing video from Fox News and from some other right-wing freaks where they try to argue that Trump is aging in reverse. They've gone full North Korea, and they're defending him in the most bizarre ways, which are probably not convincing to 85% of the country. So we'll dive into that as well. We also have Nick Fuentes and Asmongold perhaps giving a shocking take here where they're codifying their nihilism, let's say. And then later on, the March for Billionaires, which is an actual thing that happened. March for Billionaires completely flops in humiliating fashion. It was a total embarrassment, and I have the pictures for you, so can't wait to show you that. And also later on, Rogan accidentally reveals the truth about his relationship with Trump. But really, I think the more important thing is that Trump let the cat out of the bag in an interview recently, and he says how close he is with Joe Rogan, which helps to kind of explain why Joe Rogan is so cooked and so washed and so done, because apparently he has a direct line exactly to the White House to this day. And they're almost at the point where they're getting together on the weekends and shit. I'm not kidding. I wish I was. So we'll talk about that in a little bit. Everybody do me a big favor. Subscribe to the channel. Click that bell icon. Clicking the bell is actually super important because you don't need to rely on the YouTube algorithm to serve you the videos from Secular Talk, because as you all know, politics is pretty controversial. YouTube doesn't like to spread that stuff. So subscribe and click that bell icon. That's how you know when we're releasing videos. You can also support the show on Patreon. Thank you to everybody who does that. I need you guys to remember, man, I've never had a conversation with an advertiser. I've never done an ad read. I never will. I've never talked to a billionaire, never got money from a PAC or a government or anything like that. You guys support the show from the ground up. This is real grassroots independent media. We have your support in the default ads on YouTube, and that's it. And it's going to stay that way. So thank you for everybody who supports the show and believes in independent media. Like I said, you can support on Patreon, or you could sign up for Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack, or you could even just tip with that thanks button on YouTube. That, of course, goes a long way as well. And then everybody also go sub to Corin's World so you can see the live Kyle and Corin podcast every Monday night. I think the next 2 weeks, Corin's away. So I don't think we have them the next 2 weeks, but after that, we should be back. So, all right, guys, let's go ahead and jump right in ski. So I want to start with this. The New Republic says, President Trump has given us the worst January since the Great Recession. U.S.-based employers laid off 108,000 employees last month, 3 times as many as in December and twice as many as January 2025. So layoffs surged to nearly 20-year high as job openings plummet. So this is one huge problem. Look, another part of this is that ChatGPT has already eliminated about 34% of entry-level jobs. ChatGPT is also coming for the white-collar jobs. So in the same way that NAFTA and the World Trade Organization and globalization and free trade sort of destroyed America's manufacturing base and outsourced it, now it looks like the AI revolution is coming to take away the remaining jobs that had decent pay, the white-collar jobs. So the blue-collar jobs were already destroyed, and now they're coming for the white-collar jobs. And so what happens in a scenario where there's nothing for people to do to make a decent living? It's ugly. It's ugly is what it is. And we all know there's not even talk about helping out regular people in the age of the AI takeover. They don't even head fake in that direction. You literally have these sadistic billionaires who say, oh yeah, AI is going to take everybody's job. It's going to be awesome. What? Why is that awesome? What are people supposed to do for money? How are they supposed to pay the bills? How are they supposed to take care of their kids? So it's almost like they're begging for a revolution. They're begging for them to be put in line. We really have to punish these sadistic billionaires, the Epstein class, because they have all the money, they have all the income, they have all the wealth, they have all the power and the control, they run the government, and now they're even trying to take away the crumbs that the American people get. All right, so we also have this. Perhaps unsurprisingly, because it's tied to what we just talked about, U.S. credit card debt is skyrocketing. Total outstanding credit card balances are up to a record $1.25 trillion, nearly doubling from 2013 of $660 billion. 2013 was not that long ago. Since 2020, credit card debt has soared $500 billion or plus 67%. Oh my goodness. In December alone, revolving credit spiked by $13.8 billion, the largest monthly jump since 2023. Meanwhile, the average credit card interest rate sits at 22.2%, near the record of 23.4%. Americans are drowning in high interest debt. The other thing is, we've seen people are now using Klarna, buy now, pay later, for fucking groceries. And groceries have shot up in price massively because we're dealing with runaway inflation, right? Under the Trump regime with his stupid fucking trade war, which has now left us alienated and isolated from the rest of the world. The farmers in this country, don't even get me started on that. The farmers have been stabbed in the back by Trump. He says, I'm going to give you a $12 billion bailout. Well, guess what? That's a fraction of what they fucking need. Trump just allowed, he signed an executive order allowing beef from Argentina to now come into this country. Well, that undercuts the U.S. farmers who are already struggling, and it's going to put them out of business. So Trump is destroying farming in this country. And now credit card debt is out of control, okay? So you have, what else do you have? You have student loan debt that's out of control. And Trump is saying, we're going to make you start paying it back again, and you're going to have to pay more than you did before. Well, guess what? They did that, and they hit a brick wall, and I think they just reversed that because they may have realized, oh shit, this could be the catalyst that blows up the entire economy, and the house of cards comes down, right? Because that's what this is. It's a house of cards. This shit is built on a foundation of sand, okay? Any minute now, we could be looking at the next great recession, the next great depression, but now we're dealing with credit card debt skyrocketing out of control. How about this? How bad has the U.S. debt crisis become? Interest payments on U.S. public debt to overseas holders surged to a record $292 billion in the third quarter of 2025. This amount has more than doubled since 2020. The U.S. Treasury now pays 6 times more to international holders of U.S. debt than before the 2008 financial crisis. This comes as foreign investors hold a record $9.1 trillion in U.S. Treasuries, 4 times higher than 2005 levels. The U.S. government is paying insane amounts of interest. Look what that looks like as a chart. Now, normally, I wouldn't care about the debt and I wouldn't care about annual deficits. I genuinely wouldn't, okay? But the problem is, now that Trump is putting his middle finger up to the world and ripping up agreements that we have with the rest of the world and like lecturing them at Davos, right? Trump has now made it so the rest of the world hates us. Our closest allies are now becoming enemies. And so what you're seeing is they're dumping U.S. treasuries, okay? And so what happens when the world is now realizing America is psychotic, we don't want them to be the world's leader? Well, obviously, they're slowly but surely moving away from the dollar. Well, when the world eventually gets off the dollar as the world reserve currency, then we are mega cooked because there's going to be a crisis in the confidence of the dollar and it's going to plummet in value, okay? And it's at that time that our debt crisis becomes real and we deal with potential hyperinflation because now we're no longer the world reserve currency and the dollar loses a tremendous amount of value. Well, then you're dealing with, you're dealing with food shortages. You're dealing with not being able to get basic goods. You're dealing with a population that is revolting. You're dealing with genuine unrest, the likes of which we haven't seen in this country since arguably the Great Depression. Okay? Insane. Insane. And all of this was avoidable. All of it. Trump literally called himself the king of debt before he ran for political office. Well, now you know. Guys, there's times he's had companies that have gone bankrupt, and I'm not kidding. Up until the day before they filed for bankruptcy, he was out there singing the praises of the company, saying, we're doing great, we're doing tremendous, we're doing amazing, nobody's ever done like we're doing. And then the next day, boom, bankruptcy. This is who this guy is. How do you bankrupt casinos? It's basically a business where people come and just give you money to lose. How do you He found a way to do it. He found a way to do it. So he's now doing that to the country, ladies and gentlemen. He's doing it to the country. And this was all avoidable. All you had to do was not alienate the U.S. from the world, not isolate us from the rest of the world, not rip up trade agreements that he himself signed with Canada. He did the deal in the first term. In the second term, he rips up the deal that he did. right? Pulled out of the Paris Climate Agreement, for example. That was a catastrophe. Now pulling out of the World Health Organization. Literally making it so we're totally isolated. Destroying this country. All right, I'm still not done, though, because then we have this. Ready? The Nebraska legislature has approved a bill that lowers the minimum wage from $15 an hour to $13.50 for young workers. So in the midst of an economic crisis that's bubbling up, okay? What is MAGA doing at the state level in Nebraska? They're going, how about we lower the minimum wage? There is a special place in hell for these people. And you think they wouldn't try to do the same shit at the federal level? These MAGA Republicans? Of course they would. First of all, they ain't raising dick. They're not going to raise it, even though 725 is comically, absurdly low. Okay? But I wouldn't be surprised if they try to wipe that bitch off the books. They don't want there to be a minimum wage. They genuinely don't. As they're cutting taxes for the billionaire class, they're raising taxes on the bottom 90% of Americans. They're taking away your Medicaid. They're increasing your health insurance premiums double, triple, quadruple in some cases. This is what we're dealing with here. This is a war on the American people. This is a war on the American people. And let's remember the current state of affairs. Let's remember that the bottom 80% of Americans hold just 7% of the wealth. Think about that. Really think about that. Let's remember that the bottom 50% of Americans holds just 2.6% of the wealth. That is insane and completely and utterly unsustainable. We're looking at levels of income and wealth inequality that are worse than the literal Gilded Age. 3 billionaires have more wealth than the bottom 50% combined. And by the way, lest you think it's a meritocracy and they just work the hardest, 60% of billionaires come from extreme privilege. Okay? This is not a meritocracy. It's not the harder you work, the further you go. That's simply not how it works. It's just not how it works. And so none of this is ever going to be fixed until we tax the billionaires out of existence. I think they'll be all right with $999 million, okay? I think they'll be okay. We could even send them a plaque in the mail from the U.S. government that says, congratulations, you won a capitalism. Here's the hospitals you funded. Here's the schools you funded. Tax those motherfuckers, take that money, and give everybody else a chance. But no, the world we live in now, it's income and wealth inequality that's out of control, and they're only making it worse. They're only giving more money and more power to the billionaires, more control to the billionaires, more control to the Epstein class, protecting them, even though we have a bunch of them dead to rights on being pedophile rapists. Stop and think about that, how out of whack the system is. Power is protecting power. That's what it is. And as the entire economy crumbles around us, they're doing nothing to try to stop it. In fact, Trump's decisions on a daily basis are only making it worse.
Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.